I have a question. I didn't necessarily vote for Donald Trump, but as I've said before on the show, and I think I've said going back for several months at this point, that whether I vote for him or not is secondary to the point that there are certain points of view that Donald Trump has espoused that I've wanted him to hammer home and to hit it that much harder. One of those points of view has to do with this notion of ending the Ukrainian war. The majority of the American public, when asked who did they trust more so on foreign policy, ended up voting for Donald Trump. You can look at the exit polling on that, and it backs it up. They believe that the policy that Trump espoused, this notion of ending the war, on some level they believed him on it and voted for him on that policy. Meaning, the people who voted for Donald Trump for the issues of foreign policy did so because they thought he would be a better steward of the world than the current administration, or for that matter, Kamala Harris, which would basically prolong that current administration's policy in regards to foreign policy, that policy being war, knocking over governments, or for that matter, forever war. Even in the election, Donald Trump was derided for his position of being willing to talk to Kim Jong-un, being willing to end the war in Ukraine that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives. They derided him on it, and yet the American public preferred him as opposed to the orthodoxy on that issue. All right. He won on that issue. He won on that issue with speeches like this.
Be done. We have never been closer to World War III than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict between nuclear armed powers would mean death and destruction on a scale unmatched in human history. It would be nuclear Armageddon. Nothing is more important than avoiding that nightmare. We will avoid it, but we need new leadership. Every day this proxy battle in Ukraine continues, we risk global war. We must be absolutely clear that our objective is to immediately have a total cessation of hostilities. All shooting has to stop.
All right. He said that months ago. And he said that months ago, which is almost at this moment prescient. He wins the election. And there's silence. And I get it. When you first win the election, all of the physical toll that it takes on you to win that particular election, you want to take a break. But ever since the election was over with, you've had an escalation. And you've had an escalation in a way where you get people like Joe Biden coming out, agreeing, reversing policy after losing the election to allow long-range strikes into Russia. And look, when this policy first came up and they were first talking about it, Russia, A, said it was a red line, B, said they were thinking about changing their nuclear policy, and by the way, did change nuclear policy. Basically, any major strikes that are taking place that are backed by a foreign NATO power or foreign government that is a nuclear force, they consider those strikes to be liable for nuclear retaliation. Right here, you can hear him in his own words.
Dated version of the document, aggression against Russia by any non-nuclear state, but with the support of a nuclear state, is proposed to be considered as their joint attack on Russia. Russia will also consider the possibility of using nuclear weapons when receiving reliable information about a massive launch of means of aerospace attack and their crossing of our state border.
He said this months ago. And he pointed out very clearly that if you indeed fire those missiles at Russia, then you are at war. Basically, that is an act of war. All right. Joe Biden initially backed away from it, but then after losing the election, came out and said, okay, fair enough. You can use long-range strike weapons now on Russia. Everybody reported, including WAPO. Biden approves Ukraine's use of long-range U.S. weapons inside Russia, reversing policy. You get people like Keir Starmer. Immediately, the UK jumped on the same bandwagon. Hey, if Joe Biden is going to do it, great. UK sent dozens of Storm Shadow missiles several weeks ago before long-range strikes on Russian territory. This was according to Bloomberg. And of course, you get the French. French and military is usually comedic when it's said together. But nevertheless, Macron also wants to get in on this and says, yeah, you can use our missiles to hit Russia. Fair game. Let's do that. You get Zelensky coming out, pumping out his chest, saying this. I'm laughing because every military assessment said that doing this will not, in any circumstance, change the context of the war. Meaning you doing this is not going to make a difference. Ukraine is losing either way. Zelensky comes out in bad English and says this.
Of talk in the media about us receiving permission for respective actions, but strikes are not carried out with words. Such things are not announced. Missiles will speak for themselves.
Strikes are not carried out in words. Our missiles will speak for itself. And again, he's talking about a wonder weapon that no analysis brings up will change the context of the battlefield. The issue is that firing those missiles, you are using Western hands to do so, and you're doing it in Russia proper. We're not talking about in the disputed regions. We're talking about you using those weapons in Russia proper. The reporting came out today, I believe it was in Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal, that they are being crushed in the Kursk region, that they are clinging by their fingernails to the policy, to the areas that they are holding. That they don't have access to satellites. They don't have access to the infrastructure that would be in Ukraine, in which case they are getting crushed. The majority of Ukrainians at this point, based on the Gallup poll, wants to end the war. It was, I believe, 28% back in 2022, 28, 29% back in 2023, 2024. That number jumped to 52% said, yes, we want to end this war. That includes even a majority of soldiers. And yet, you get people like Keir Starmer, when being asked directly, hey, Russia has changed its nuclear doctrine, and they are saying that you guys may be hit if you indeed continue to escalate and fire missiles at their territory. Starmer comes out and says this.
Just quickly, Russia's also threatened nuclear escalation. Are you comfortable with that when people at home are watching this, worrying that you could put us at risk?
Well, it's very
Nuclear war?
important. It's very important that we're steadfast in our support for Ukraine. Russia is the aggressor,
Even
and
if
Russia,
it unleashes nuclear war?
Russia has to be the one that makes the move to stop this war. It's within their gift. But we must support Ukraine. It's impacting not just Ukraine, it's impacting the rest of the world, including the UK.
Is your message to viewers back home that there will not be a nuclear war? Because that is what Russia is threatening.
My message is that we need to ensure that Ukraine is put in the best possible position. This is 1,000 days of conflict, and there is a very high cost if Russian aggression is seen to pay off.
Again, that is mind-blowing. The reporter is asking him point blank, you realize that they could hit us and end the world. Are you really willing to risk that over Ukraine? Well, we have to fight for Ukraine. We have to do that. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, there's a really high cost if we lose this war. High cost versus the world? That's the high cost all for Ukraine? Are you out of your mind? All right, fair enough. Putin comes out and does this. You guys aren't hearing me? You aren't paying attention to me? You think I'm bluffing? Fair enough. Here's a new weapon system called the Oreshnik. It is moving at Mach 12 You can't stop it. You can't do anything about it. Here you go. This stuff is moving so fast. Mach 12. It is hard to wrap my head around it, but nevertheless, there it is. To make this even clearer, let me see if I can get a better video for this. Here is another version of this. I mean, the speed at this is just astonishing. The missile system breaks into 6 parts, which breaks into another 6 parts as it finally hits the ground and destroys pretty much anything that it touches. It's unimaginable. All right. Then Putin comes out, addresses the public, and says this.
Такому оружию на сегодняшний день не существует. Ракеты атакуют цель.
Damn, this is not the English version of it. I have an English version of it, but effectively, he gives a statement to the public. And he tells the public in that statement, and for the most part, tells the world, look, I didn't start this. I warned you. You're provoking us. I'm paraphrasing. You're provoking us. So fair enough. This is a new weapon called the Oreshnik. It moves at Mach 12. I will give you forewarning when I launch this because you can't do anything to stop it. You can't touch it. Full stop. If you continue to attack us, you will become legitimate targets. Just know it. Mic drop, leaves. Now, obviously, the point of this is you're firing, for one, you've expanded to our border. 2, you knocked over a government of Ukraine and puts in this kind of patsy government that hates Russians. 3, you get breakaway regions of Ukraine, of ethnic Russian Ukrainians, because again, the legitimate government has fallen. They decide to break away. Ukraine decides to start killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians to the tune of 14,000. Russia gets involved, meaning your hands are all in this from the very beginning of it, And you've taken provocative action from the very beginning. And now you are firing your weapon systems into Russia. This is a red line. The escalation stops now. Instead of getting this point that Russia will always respond, as he said, they say to themselves, maybe we need to put nukes in Ukraine as a deterrent. Maybe we need to put in French and British troops who, under normal circumstances, couldn't fill a doghouse, but we should put them into Ukraine. Maybe we should give Ukraine JASSM missiles. This is the stuff they're saying as a direct response to Putin doing that terrifying demonstration of power. We are whistling past the graveyard on a knife's edge to oblivion. And we have people, leaders, who are either despised in their country, like Keir Starmer, with 2 million people in 24 hours just signed a recall or a no confidence petition on Keir Starmer. Macron, who keep losing elections over and over and over again, and is again despised by his population. Or Joe Biden, who is literally cognitively damaged and yet has the capability of ending the world. My question is, where the fuck is Donald Trump? Where the fuck is Donald Trump? He seems to be on vacation. And what's wild about it is while all of this escalation is taking place, Biden is nowhere to be seen. Kamala Harris is on vacation. They're doing this stuff behind the scenes in this kind of weird de facto way. And Trump out to lunch. Where's the guy who gave this speech that says we are on the brink of nuclear oblivion? Where did that guy go? It sounds like he got elected on stuff like this.
We have never been closer, 3, than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict.
And then after winning the election, called it a day. In fact, he didn't call it a day because Donald Trump has been seen. If you go to Donald Trump's account on Twitter, you'll see this. Let's go down right here. November 19th. All right. Russia launched Dereshnik, as it's called, on, was it 20th? I believe something like the 20th. 21st, I'm sorry. On 19th, he's at SpaceX. So he's around. He's doing stuff. Here he is, Donald Trump, president-elect, hanging out with Elon Musk at SpaceX. So he's around. All right. And today, on the 20th, he has something to say, but today, the 19th, these cases, like all other cases I have been forced to go through, are empty and lawless and should never have been brought. Over $100 million of taxpayer money has been wasted in the Democrat Party's fight against the political opponent. Me. Nothing like this has ever happened in our country before. They have also used state prosecutors and district attorneys like Fani Willis and her lover, Nathan Wade, who has absolutely zero experiences in cases such as this, but was paid millions, enough for them to take numerous trips and cruises around the globe. Letitia James, who inappropriately, unethically, and probably illegally campaigned on getting Trump in order to win a political office. Dude, they are about to bring the world to an end. And the best thing that you could do is talk about the fact that they've killed your cases. The very fact that you can bring this up on Twitter at all indicates that you have the capability of saying something. You have the capability of calling a press conference. You have the capability of posting on Twitter that you don't like the escalation that Joe Biden is doing, and he's usurping the fact that you won the election on the ticket of stopping the war. You have the capability of responding. And the best thing he can do is talk about himself. They are trying to bring the world to an end. Do you get that? I feel like the episode of Supernatural where they were looking for God. And in looking for God, they trapped an angel. It was an archangel or something like that. And Dean is popping off at the angel. And the angel looks at him and tells him, "You are living in a godless world, boy. Do you get that?" That's the way this feels. It's almost like you're missing the plot. I understand that this was important to you, but from the standpoint of the globe, this doesn't matter. We got that this was political cases against you. I get that the prosecutor has just dropped that case. Congratulations. Good job. Now do your job. And it is deafening that Donald Trump isn't saying anything, because what it sounds like is he sold the public a bill of goods, that he effectively betrayed his base. In the way that Donald Trump lies as easily as he breathes, it sounds like he is okay with this level of escalation. Hell, he may even be in on this level of escalation in the conversation that he might have had with Joe Biden. Who the hell knows what they actually talked about? I'm saying the fact that Donald Trump hasn't said anything is, on some level, Donald Trump saying something. And until Donald Trump says something about it, Donald Trump is complicit as anybody else in this particular escalation, because the president-elect has the ability to say, this is outrageous. How are you doing this? You're trying to start a war. You are ignoring the democratic will of the American public by allowing the lame duck president, the too cognitively damaged to even run, to potentially end the world, or at the very least escalate to a level that would complicate any kind of terms that the next administration may go with in coming in, meaning he's usurping your win. And you seem to have nothing to say about it, despite the fact that you can talk about your case on Twitter. Where the fuck is Donald Trump? That's my question. I don't have an answer to that question, but that should be all of our question at this point, especially people that came out and voted for him thinking that his policy was at the very least going to bring down some level of hostilities. At this point, we are whistling past the graveyard. And what Western leaders at this point have decided to do was continue to escalate, either believing that Putin is bluffing or being willing to go to some kind of war. And I'm saying that is outrageous. And the guy who got elected on a ticket of saying we need to stop this escalation, nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, and I am going to say subscribe. Have a good one.